Many ancient epics begin with a clash of bronze or the forging of steel. But in the national epic of Finland, the world begins with a song. Here, the primordial ocean is not conquered through battle, but molded by the vibration of a voice. From these waters comes the central hero, Väinämöinen. He arrives as an old, bearded shaman who immediately begins sowing the first forests and organizing the islands, physically building the landscape piece by piece. The magic of this world is built on origins. If a singer knows the deep, primordial history of the thing, the true birth of iron, or the beginning of a tree, they gain absolute command over it. To speak the origin of a storm is to have the power to calm it. In this cosmos, a well-placed stanza carries more weight than a spear. The most powerful figures are those who have spent centuries memorizing the songs that define reality. That power is challenged when a brash young man named J.R.R. travels south. Envying the old shaman's status, he insists on a duel of magical knowledge to prove he is the superior singer. The battle is brief. Väinämöinen simply sings a spell that turns the earth beneath his rival's feet into a thick, swallowing marsh. With a few verses, J.R.R. is buried up to his neck. To save himself from the mire, the young man offers a desperate trade. He promises Väinämöinen his sister, Aino, as a bride, if the shaman will only sing him back onto dry land. Väinämöinen is delighted. He sees the young woman as a prize for his victory, seemingly unaware that while he was singing, Aino was at home, weeping at the news that she had been traded like property. The shaman has mastered the songs of the earth and the sky. Now he expects to simply walk home and claim a bride who wants nothing to do with him. Aino refuses to honor her brother's bargain. Rather than enter a forced marriage with a man centuries her senior, she walks out into the sea and lets the cold currents take her. Väinämöinen is devastated. He takes his boat into the waves, using every magical net and fishing spell at his disposal to dredge the water for any sign of her. He eventually hooks a strange fish, but as he pulls it toward the boat, it transforms into Aino herself. She mocks him for failing to recognize her in his own net, then slips back into the depths, gone forever. The old shaman is left alone in his boat. He has used his supreme magic to search every corner of the sea, and it has brought him nothing but a final, mocking goodbye. He stands in a world he helped sing into existence, yet he has no power to bring back the woman who chose the water over him. After Aino's death, Väinämöinen travels north toward the land of Pohjola, looking for another chance to secure a wife among its famous daughters. He is met by Louhi, the formidable mistress of the north. She is a master of both magic and negotiation, and she sees the shaman's arrival as a political opportunity. Louhi sets a steep price for her daughter's hand, the forging of the Sampo. This mechanical mill is designed to grind wealth directly from the air, producing endless streams of flour, salt, and gold. Master smith Ilmarinen builds the machine and delivers it into Louhi's mountain gold. But even with the wealth mill grinding away, the bride refuses the match, and the heroes are sent home. Louhi now holds a device of infinite prosperity. The men from the south have given away their greatest labor and secured nothing but a long, empty walk back home. As Väinämöinen ages, a new hero named Lemminkainen emerges. He is a charismatic warrior seducer who relies on speed and charm, whereas the old shaman relies on wisdom. Driven by his own vanity, Lemminkainen decides to travel to Pohjola to woo the maidens himself. He ignores his mother's pleas for him to stay, convinced his luck will hold in the dangerous north. He leaves his hairbrush with her as a sign. If he is killed, the brush will begin to bleed. A simple alarm system for a man who expects to survive by his wits. In Louhi's hall, Lemminkainen uses his songs to charm the entire court. However, he pauses his performance to mock a blind elderly herdsman in the corner, insulting the man's age and low status before the entire court. He feels untouchable in his success. He doesn't notice the herdsman leave the hall, quietly waiting in the dark for a chance at revenge. Louhi gives Lemminkainen a final task. he must travel to the underworld and shoot a mystical swan floating on the river of Tuonela. As Lemminkainen watches the swan, the blind herdsman he insulted strikes from the shadows. The hero is caught off guard, killed instantly by the man he deemed too weak to notice. His body is hacked into pieces and thrown into the black, churning waters of the River of Death. Back in the south, his mother watches in silence as the hairbrush he left behind begins to drip with fresh blood. The warrior who thought he could outrun his mother's warnings is gone. His own cruelty at the court of Pohjola followed him to the riverbank. Lemminkainen's mother travels alone into the underworld. She enters the realm of the dead, a place where even the most powerful singers fear to walk. She takes a massive iron rake and begins the physical labor of dredging the River of Death. She pulls her son's remains from the mud, piece by piece. On the riverbank, she aligns the bones and knits the flesh back together. She reconstructs his body with her own hands, refusing to accept the finality of his death. For the final spark of life, she sends a golden bee to fetch divine honey from the heavens. She applies the honey to his lips, and her son breathes again. It took more than a warrior's song to conquer death. It required a mother dredging the Black River mud until her son was whole again. The heroes of these first 15 cantos forge the dome of the sky and build the foundations of the earth. They move mountains with a single verse, yet these same men end their stories empty-handed, shipwrecked or left hiding in the forest. Their songs give them command over nature, but their pride keeps them from holding on to what they truly want. The most enduring actions in the epic belong to the women. It is Aino's choice to leave the world, Louhi's skill in keeping her kingdom wealthy, and a mother's labor at the River of Death. These stories survived because they were sung by generations of people sitting by windows like this one, playing the kantele and passing the verses down. In the Kalevala, a song might be strong enough to build a universe, but it is the persistent, vulnerable will of a person that determines whether they survive it. Long before modern borders were drawn, the mythic landscape of Finland was defined by a bitter, high-stakes rivalry between two ancient realms, the land of Kalevala and the dark northern domain of Pohjola. The ultimate prize driving this conflict is the Maiden of Pohjola. Renowned for her beauty, she is fiercely guarded by her mother, Louhi, the powerful matriarch and mistress of the north. Väinämöinen, a wise and ancient sage, desires the maiden for his own. To reach her, he begins constructing a magical boat, but his work halts when he realizes he is missing the specific ancient incantations needed to finish the vessel. Desperate for the lost words, he travels down into Tuonela, the land of the dead. The journey nearly costs him his life. He is imprisoned by the rulers of the underworld and only manages to escape by shape-shifting into a snake and swimming through the river's deadly nets. To achieve his worldly desire of claiming a bride, the sage abandons the safety of the living and wades directly into macabre, perilous magic. Still lacking his spells, Väinämöinen seeks out Antero Vipunen. Vipunen is a primeval, long-dead giant whose decaying mind holds the ancient knowledge buried so deep in the earth that trees grow from his skull. As Väinämöinen attempts to extract the spells, the giant stirs. Vipunen opens his massive jaws and swallows the sage whole, trapping him inside his stomach. Väinämöinen does not panic. Inside the giant's belly, he uses his magic to fashion a makeshift forge, striking an anvil to burn and tear at Vipunen from the inside out. The relentless, agonizing pain breaks the giant's will. To stop the torment, Vipunen finally opened his mouth and chants the ancient boat-building spells, allowing the sage to escape. Armed with these extracted words, Väinämöinen sets sail for Pohjola. He arrives certain that his command over this violent, ancient magic will force the north to yield the maiden. But news of the sage's voyage quickly reaches Ilmarinen, the divine blacksmith of Kalevala. Dropping his work, Ilmarinen abandons his forge and races north to compete for the maiden's hand. Ilmarinen is the exact inverse of Väinämöinen. Where the ancient sage commands esoteric underworld magic, Ilmarinen relies on practical, physical mastery. He's the artificer who hammered the actual dome of the sky into shape. When both suitors present themselves in Pohjola, the maiden makes a clear and immediate choice. She rejects the ancient bard and his songs, pointing instead to the blacksmith. Mistress Louhi intervenes. She refuses to give her daughter away freely, telling Ilmarinen that if he wants the maiden, he must prove his worth by completing 3 seemingly impossible feats of physical labor. A mastery of ancient spells is no longer enough to win the prize. The North demands tangible execution and physical mastery over the elements. Louhi's first trial is instantly lethal. She orders Ilmarinen to plow a dark field teeming with writhing vipers. Relying on quiet guidance from the maiden herself, Ilmarinen turns to his anvil. He forges armor of gold and silver, wading safely into the venomous earth protected by his own craftsmanship. Next, Louhi demands he subjugate the monstrous wolves and bears roaming the borders of Tuonela. Ilmarinen tracks them down and subdues them with brute strength and heavy iron chains. For his final test, he is sent to the River of Death to catch a massive mythical pike without the use of a net. Ilmarinen hauls the giant fish from the deadly waters. He survives the final trial, claims his bride, and formally seals the alliance between Kalevala and Pohjola. Here, Väinämöinen's ancient magic had finally reached its absolute limit. It was Ilmarinen's physical work, the heat of the forge and the weight of the plow, that secured the alliance with the North. The brutal trials give way to a massive communal celebration. In Pohjola, great halls are prepared for a lavish wedding feast. The scale of the event demands staggering agricultural resources. The community slaughters a giant steer and brews vats of ceremonial beer to accommodate the guests. This gathering moves beyond the solitary quests of the past. The focus shifts toward the shared labor of the harvest and the brewing of ceremonial ale, grounding the myth in communal ritual. Even Väinämöinen accepts his place in this new order. Letting go of his failure as a suitor, he adopts the societal role of master bard and strikes the strings of his cantilate to bless the union with music. The celebration concludes with the couple being instructed in the specific duties of marriage. Their union is now anchored in these social obligations, moving the story past the era of isolated magical feats. But this fragile peace rests on a dangerous oversight. The reckless warrior Lemminkainen was deliberately left off the guest list. Known for his arrogance and endless bloody feuds, Lemminkainen is a symbol of the old, chaotic violence that this new society is attempting to discard. Hearing the distant sounds of the feast, he reacts with furious resentment. He arms himself, fully resolving to march through the forest and crash the celebration. Craftsmanship and diplomacy have momentarily brought Kalevala and Pohjola together, but the underlying violence of the mythic North remains untamed, and it is heading straight for their doors. Finland's national epic, the Kalevala, is traditionally defined by its soaring creation myths. It presents a world shaped by nature spirits and the melodic, world-building magic of the sage Väinämöinen. However, in its middle chapters, Cantos 26 through 38, the narrative pivots. The mythic grandeur is replaced by a landscape of psychological realism. 3 figures dominate this era: a reckless warrior driven by vanity, an orphan slave defined by inherited trauma, and a grieving creator attempting to engineer his way out of sorrow. When men who possess the magical abilities of gods succumb to these specific human impulses, the scale of the damage changes. While the epic features literal monsters and dark magic, the instability of the heroes themselves serves as the primary engine for the story's eventual collapse. Lemminkainen is a charismatic warrior whose survival depends on his public image. When the northern realm of Pohjola hosts a major wedding and leaves him off the guest list, his ego is wounded. He treats this social slight as a declaration of war. He crashes the celebration and kills the master of the North in a duel, viewing the bloodshed as a necessary restoration of his pride. Louhi, the mistress of the North, immediately retaliates. She conjures a freezing magic to hunt him down, turning the landscape itself against him. Lemminkäinen survives the pursuit, but while he is hiding, the North's army burns his home to the ground. His sanctuary is destroyed as a direct consequence of his initial reckless duel. His godlike combat skills could win the duel, but they were useless in protecting him from the isolation and ruin his own ego invited. The Kalevala then moves into the story of Kullervo. An orphan sold into slavery, he is a character whose entire identity is forged within a cycle of abuse. The catalyst for his rage is the loss of a family heirloom. When his enslaver's wife bakes a stong into his bread, it shatters his father's knife, the only link to his past. Kullervo uses his magic to summon a pack of bears and wolves, directing the beasts to kill the woman in a disproportionate display of vengeance. This act of violence leads only to further ruin, a series of tragedies including accidental incest and the eventual destruction of his uncle's household, culminating in Kullervo's own suicide. This specific portrayal of an inescapable, recursive cycle of doom provided a new template for the fantasy genre. J.R.R. Tolkien would later use Kullervo's arc of inescapable ruin as the direct blueprint for the character of Turin Turambar. Kullervo's story demonstrates that even supernatural strength is unable to break a generational cycle of trauma once it has been set in motion. Ilmarinen is the everlasting craftsman who forged the sky itself, but following the death of his wife, the creator is unable to fix the reality of his own grief. He attempts to manufacture a solution. Using his supreme metallurgical skills, he forges a new bride out of pure gold and silver. The attempt fails. The golden bride is physically cold and emotionally hollow. No matter how perfect the craftsmanship, the object cannot replace the life he lost. His failure to conquer death leads to a moral decline. He kidnaps another daughter of the North, and when she rejects him, uses his magic to turn her into a bird. Ilmarinen's mastery over the physical world is total, yet it cannot produce a human soul or alter the finality of a loss. These three personal failures eventually spill over into the geopolitical landscape of the epic. Lemminkäinen's prideful murder, Kullervo's vengeance, and Ilmarinen's kidnapping have collectively dismantled the fragile peace between the people of the South and the North. When Ilmarinen returns home, his resentment leads him to tell Väinämöinen about the North's immense wealth generated by the magical Sampo he once built for them. The resulting greed and shared bitterness lead the heroes to launch a naval raid to seize the Sampo for themselves. The Kalevala tracks a specific progression, how personal grief, trauma, and pride move from the individual to the collective, until the magic that built the world is dismantled by the hands that created it. To understand the Finnish national epic, the Kalevala, we have to look to the landscape itself. Deep in the ancient mythical past, the geography is split into two warring factions. In the south lies the land of Kalevala, and to the north sits the rival realm of Pohjola. A deep economic divide separates the two territories. While Kalevala suffers through long winters of scarcity and hardship, Pohjola thrives, sitting on immense, overflowing wealth. The source of that northern wealth is a singular artifact known as the Sampo. Forged by the master blacksmith Ilmarinen, the Sampo is described as a mysterious, three-sided machine, a mechanical mill of endless production. It requires no raw materials to operate. One side grinds out an endless supply of flour, the second produces limitless salt, and the third generates infinite gold from thin air. This machine of infinite prosperity is held by Louhi, the terrifying witch matriarch of Pohjola, who fiercely guards its output for her own people. Faced with starvation and poverty in the south, the revered heroes of Kalevala, the ancient sage Väinämöinen, the blacksmith Ilmarinen, and the reckless warrior Lemminkäinen, realize they have no choice but to cross the border and steal it. The heroes launch a daring naval raid on the northern stronghold. To bypass Louhi's armies, Väinämöinen plays his stringed instrument, the kantele, projecting a magical melody so powerful it lulls the realm of Pohjola into a deep sleep. With the guards neutralized, the three men break into the stone vault, physically plowing the Sampo's roots from the bedrock, haul the massive mill onto their wooden boat, and set sail for home. But Louhi awakens. Discovering her vault empty, the matriarch summons a fierce storm, transforms her own body into a massive eagle, and descends on the thieves in the open ocean. A brutal fight erupts on the deck of the small ship, as Väinämöinen and his crew attempt to fight off the giant bird's sweeping talons with their swords and oars. During the chaos, the heavy Sampo is knocked overboard. It crashes into the freezing waves and shatters into pieces. The largest fragments sink to the bottom of the ocean, continuing to grind out salt, permanently giving the oceans their salinity. By going to war over a machine of infinite abundance, the rival factions ensure that neither side can ever use it again. The prize is gone. With the artifact destroyed, the border dispute collapses into a supernatural war of revenge. Deprived of her wealth, Louhi abandons conventional warfare and turns to magic. She strikes Kalevala first with an invisible wave of lethal diseases, followed by a monstrous bear sent down to slaughter the southerners' cattle. Väinämöinen responds by drawing on his deep knowledge of the old ways. He crafts salves and sings ancient healing incantations, successfully curing his people and defeating the beast. Defeated on the ground, Louhi targets the sky. She reaches up and physically steals the sun and the moon from the heavens, locking them away inside a mountain. To finalize her retaliation, she extinguishes every hearth and flame in Kalevala. The world is plunged into an absolute freezing darkness. A regional feud over stolen property has escalated into an assault on reality itself. By weaponizing the elements of the cosmos out of pure grief, the Witch of Pohjola pushes humanity to the edge of extinction. Standing in the frozen dark, Väinämöinen and the blacksmith Ilmarinen are forced to shift from raiders to cosmic saviors. They have to restore the physical universe. Their first task is to bring back the heat. After a long search through the darkened waters, they hunt down a massive fish that had swallowed a stray spark of cosmic fire, slowly returning warmth to the land. But the sky remains empty. To retrieve the celestial bodies, Ilmarinen returns to his anvil and begins hammering out massive, heavy iron chains designed to physically bind the Witch of Pohjola. Word of the blacksmith's labor reaches the north. The terrifying prospect of being bound in these inescapable irons finally breaks Louhi's resolve. She opens her mountain vault and releases the sun and the moon back into the sky. The sun returns to its place, but the world emerges from the darkness forever changed. The heroes who once raided for gold now stand exhausted by the weight of their own power, signaling the final breaths of an era defined by magic and chaos. This realization coincides with a quiet, sudden shift in the narrative. The epic moves away from violent deities and focuses on a young, humble virgin named Marjatta. While tending her flock, Marjatta eats a single lingonberry. Miraculously, she becomes pregnant. Cast out by her family, she retreats to a remote forest stable where she gives birth to a fatherless son. As the leading figure of the old pagan order, Väinämöinen is called upon to judge the child. Viewing the miraculous birth as an ill omen, the ancient sage demands the infant be put to death. Before his order can be carried out, the 3-day-old infant opens his mouth and speaks. The child publicly rebukes Väinämöinen, listing the old man's past sins and condemning his flawed judgment. Shamed and defeated by a newborn, Väinämöinen steps aside. The child is immediately baptized and crowned as the king of Karelia. Without a single spell or a drawn blade, the ancient authority of the sage is dismantled by the child's words. The infant is baptized as the new king, establishing a world governed by a moral law that the old magic cannot overcome. Listening to the newly crowned king, Väinämöinen realizes his time is over. The age of blood feuds, magical song duels, and shamanism is now permanently obsolete. He accepts his exile. Walking down to the shore, the old sage sings one final incantation, summoning a magical copper vessel from the ether. He steps aboard and begins to sail. But he doesn't just cross the water. The copper boat leaves the mortal realm entirely, drifting slowly upward into the silent void between the earth and the sky. He takes his magic with him, but he leaves a few things behind on the beaches of Finland, a collection of ancient songs, and his wooden stringed instrument, the kantele. These songs and artifacts became the physical memory of a people, surviving long after the myths of mechanical mills and cosmic wars faded. This preserved folklore provided the cultural framework that would eventually define the modern Finnish identity.